entitled Engines for Growth. And this is the second of our series. We're going to be focusing today on self-funding and increased sales as an engine for growth. We want to start by thanking Sarah Lee, Amanda Gomez, and Renee Richards at Think Duchess. They're sponsoring this event and are great partners with us in this entrepreneurship space. I'm Pam Miner, as I said, and I'm happy to introduce my colleagues, Paul. Paul, how do you say your last name again?
Mungia.
I butcher it every time. So
yeah, it's fine.
I'm going to say Paul and blank, and then
I've grown up with everybody basically butchering it. But yeah, welcome everyone. So just a little bit of background about myself. I got started it was commercial real estate in 2008, which is the worst time to possibly get into that field. So quickly transitioned into banking. Banking led me into nonprofit lending. Nonprofit lending led me into working with entrepreneurs on a totally different level, really helping them get their businesses started. I formed a company called Upright in New York City, and we helped entrepreneurs basically go from 0 to 1, offering a host of different services to them. From there, I met one of our founders or entrepreneurs that we were helping and helped him get a trucking business off the ground by applying technology to it. We went through an accelerator program, raised some capital, built a product, and that business continues to run today. Since about 2021, I've been consulting entrepreneurs on a one-to-one basis and also working fractionally with different early stage teams. One of those companies that I've actually had the pleasure of working with is Blondery, and we've got Azraeus here from Blondery. She's had great success over the past, how long has it been? 5+ years?
6 years.
6 years. And she's going to be talking about how she got her business off the ground, and then additionally how she used customer growth to continue to expand her business and to get into more revenue lines and just continue to get her product across the nation. So with that, I'll let you, Azraeus, tell us a little bit about your background and about Blondery in general.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Blondery is a bakery based in Hudson Valley, but we ship nationwide. So we're a digitally native bakery. We started the opposite of what most bakeries do. And we grew our business over the past 6 years by just creating more customers, or sorry, my dog is here too. Creating more customers and really producing a really great product. So I'm happy to be here and share more. I believe you guys can type questions in the chat and we'll get to them as we go.
Yeah. So I guess for everybody's
I'm sorry. I didn't take the moment to just introduce Hudson Valley Center for Innovation. So let me just do that quickly. Paul and I are both with a nonprofit agency called Hudson Valley Center for Innovation. This organization is led by entrepreneurs, and we're here for entrepreneurs. We brought our personal experiences, our business expertise, and our networks to successfully help hundreds of businesses in all different stages of growth. And so we're looking forward to sharing some of that with you here in this series. Just a quick background on myself. I started my career many billion years ago, helping small businesses to expand their operations overseas. I've been in my own business for the last 20 years. And I joined the Hudson Valley Center for Innovation in 2020 and have provided programs to lots of different companies and help them grow and commercialize in this challenging ecosystem. So, okay, back to you, and let's move on. I did want to let you know that we're recording this so that it has some legs going forward, and we want this to be an interactive event. So guys, please feel free to jump in, to ask questions, to share some of your thoughts. We want it to be, a discussion, not just a one-way. So with that, I'll put it back to Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. So why don't you tell us what a blondie is to begin with? Because I know there's always a little bit of confusion around that.
Yeah, so blondie starts with the butterscotch base, and then we mix all of our other ingredients in it. So it could look brown, it could look like a brownie, but it is in fact a blondie.
Okay, great.
8 core flavors, and we sprinkle in seasonal flavors throughout the year.
And so what gave you the motivation to bring a Blondie to market and then also, have it shipped across the nation and really have it or really scale it up in the way that you have?
Yeah, so Blondery started because I was a pastry chef in fine dining. I staged at French Laundry per se. Danielle was the pastry chef at Bouchon Bakery at Thomas Keller's Yountville location. And I was making these blondies for my family and friends throughout my 10-year career in fine dining, and I would ship them back home. And then one holiday season, I just started a website just to keep track of the orders and sold over 500 orders within 2 weeks. And I figured, from there, this should probably be a business. And that was in 2017.
And so at the time you were working a full-time job?
Yep. I was a pastry chef at Pies and Thighs by that time.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so when did it get to a point where you said this either has enough potential or enough revenue, coming in the door that you could consider moving away from your part-time or full-time job and making this entrepreneurial adventure your full-time gig?
That was 2 years ago when I
Okay.
went full-time into the business. I would be full-time for maybe 5 months and then go back to work and run out of money basically, and then go back to work. And then I just went back and forth. So that's why I tell entrepreneurs, like, if you have to keep a job while you're building your company, it's okay. Like, figure it out. You don't have to jump head first into something that you're not feeling like supports you financially. I do think that it's also important to note that I utilized like unemployment, food stamps, anything that I could while I was getting my business off the ground, because, I was living in New York City now. I'm originally from the Bay Area. It's very expensive. I like rent hacked my apartment. So like I ended up basically paying no rent because I was renting out all the other bedrooms in my apartment. It was like I did a lot of things to get to the point where I could fully step away from, at the time then I was at Food Network 2 years ago, working in like ad sales, but it took a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I had lots of odds and end jobs during those 4 years of me like building the business.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because I think when we talk about self-funding, we think these entrepreneurs just have money that they're storing away and then finally decide, now I'm going to put this money into this business and I have unlimited resources. But that's never the case. Or maybe sometimes it's the case, but more often than not, it's you're figuring out creative ways to take what income you do have and channel it into the growth of a business. And I think that, some of this stuff is very unsexy that has to happen to make a business get off the ground and then to keep it going.
Yep.
So tell us about.
We ended up having, we did a large program with Westchester County during COVID, where they were sort of running this program for people to launch businesses. And during that time, people were getting basically paid to stay home, or they were getting PPP funds. So they had sort of the luxury of some cash flow that they wouldn't necessarily have otherwise, and some time to start, a new business. But it is a challenge to be juggling, having a full-time job or even a part-time job and having, and trying to get a business off the ground. And we saw that with a lot of the businesses where the biggest challenge for them was just having the time, and getting people to step in and help them and sort of give their time, because it obviously, Azarias, I'm sure it hasn't been just you growing this business. You've probably had others who have stepped in to support.
Yep, for sure. My first hire was a pastry chef. Would you like me to talk more about that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And I see your questions, Herman. I think
we'll get to them in a second. We'll set the stage of, how Azarias grew her business, then sort of get into some of the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah. So my first hire. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to, as I get my thoughts, I'm just typing them in. That's
perfect.
I don't need to right away.
My first hire was a pastry chef. I believe that was in 2020. when the business kind of started to get a lot more traction, my first year I made $2,000. My second year I made $14K. By year 3, I was at $200K. So before I knew that I was at 200 is when I hired the pastry chef. I just saw that, oh my gosh, I need help. And I had reached a point where I couldn't bake from my house anymore. It was like literally busting at the seams. So I hired a pastry chef. And when I say pastry chef, she didn't have pastry background. That was her title, but there was so many bumps and kinks along the road on like getting her to understand the recipes and everything. But it had reached a point where the business could sustain another person. Could it sustain me and her for long term? No, because I ended up having to go back to work. But during like our holiday periods, I was like, okay, I can not work, for these 4 months of the last quarter and then go back to work in like January, February.
And we've got Michelle on the call.
Sorry, how are you able to just leave the business and come back like your full-time job? You would take like a leave of absence, or?
Well, I rented kitchen space by the hour, so it wasn't like I couldn't just go on the weekends and bake something, or like you had to get very creative with how you split your time and how things just flowed. And because I was doing a drop system, meaning that our products weren't always available on our website. Every few weeks or few months, sometimes I would say, okay, a drop's coming up, sign up for our mailing list. That was a great way for me to get clients' email addresses. We got up to a list of 10,000 plus people who were always waiting for me to drop something. So then when I did a drop, I would go to the rent kitchen space, bake everything, ship it out, and then I didn't have to, keep paying monthly for kitchen space I wasn't using because I rented it by the hour.
Okay, yeah, a couple of questions on that. You talk about an email list. Do you think that tactic of, having some way to get people to come to a site, to give their email address for you then to be able to speak to them in some way, do you think that applies to every business? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think it's so important to be talking to your customers via email or text message marketing.
Okay.
It's not just social media. I know we put a lot of emphasis on social media. We have a large following, so I see the benefit of that. But if we really look at the data, most of our sales are coming from email, text message marketing. It's not necessarily coming strictly from Instagram or Facebook or whatever.
And how often are you reaching out to the customers via either?
At least once a week.
Okay.
At least. On the weekends, we do every day. So every day that we're open on the weekend, we're sending an email and a text.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have segmented those lists into people who come into the store or who have purchased from us in real life versus people who have purchased on our website. Those are two different lists.
Mm-hmm.
Herman, you've got a question?
Yeah. Over the years, when I do my installations, you make a I guess it's, I don't know the word, but I guess, you get to know the customer. So you get their phone number, of course, their address. And I always ask for their email. And I put it in my phone, and that's my software. I mean, I don't have any client software at all. But, oh, yeah, wait a minute. I do have Evernote, if anybody's ever heard of that. It's a free app. My daughter, when she was in college to be a pharmacist, now she's a pharmacist, but in any event, I asked her, how does she remember everything? There's so much to learn in pharmacy. She says, oh, Evernote, it's free, it's online, download it, it's free. So I want to say that was 10 years ago, and I've used it ever since. Oh my God, Evernote is amazing. So if anybody wants free software, go on your phone and the App Store and look for Evernote, and you can start there. I have my grocery list on there. I have all my customers' names, pictures of their equipment, model numbers, serial numbers, technical information, costs, prices, you name it. And then once you save it in that software, it allows you to search it later. So if you forget something, you can go into the search bar and just click the customer's name, even if it's first name or his last name or something you remember, his dog's name or whatever. And if you have it in that, space of where you have put his information, a whole bunch of different sections will pop up and you'll say, oh yeah, there he is. And you click on that. Also, it's also when you go for the $69.99 extra a year plan, it links it to everything. So I'm on my computer now. I can look up Evernote right now and peruse through it. And yeah, it's amazing.
So you're using it like a CRM.
I don't know what that
you
is.
you would put a question in the chat about software. Azarias, maybe this is a good time to touch on any kind of systems. I saw that you put MailChimp in there, but any kind of systems that you use that help manage, the back end of the customer data and help you outreach to them.
I wouldn't say we're as sophisticated yet as using CRM. We don't have a salesperson, so we look at the data, we do a lot of surveying, and just utilize that data to talk to our customers, but we're not dialing in maybe how a hotel would on like, this customer likes extra fluffy pillows or this customer doesn't like nuts. We're not that detailed yet,
Right.
But maybe and I don't know if my business needs that, like to be that detailed about the customer. But I do recommend MailChimp because that's just what I've been using for the past several years. They were acquired by Intuit, I believe, a few years ago. So same software as QuickBooks. And yeah, they're just an email platform. So you can store the email addresses there. You can kind of segment them. You can send out email blasts, text messages. I prefer them, but there's tons of email marketing platforms you could use.
Yeah, and you're also an interesting business that's both online and in person. I thought it'd be interesting to talk about, especially since we've got Michelle on the call who wants to open her own space. When was that inflection point that you said, I need a storefront? How did you pull together the resources to do that? What was it like working with a landlord? Did they give you a tenant improvement allowance? Any kind of detail you could provide there around the logistics of getting a retail location set up would be awesome.
Yeah, so the retail situation kind of fell in our lap, to be honest. I wasn't necessarily looking for a retail space. We were unfortunately displaced from Brooklyn during Hurricane Ida, and we had 8 days to find somewhere to bake for the holidays. Hurricane Ida, I think, happened in September. That's like the start of the busy season for us. So it's either close down the business or find somewhere to move that was pretty much turnkey. We didn't have time to build anything out or purchase any equipment really. So it needed to be kind of turnkey. And the only place I could find was in Peekskill. So it's not the space that we're at now in Peekskill, though. It was a few feet down the street. And just through fate and, being in the right place at the right time, God, the universe, whatever you believe in, someone introduced me to the space we're in now. And it was such a blessing because I did not realize how much profit could be made from having both, basically. And we do everything in that space. So it's not only a retail space, it's also our production facility and fulfillment facility. So when you walk in, it doesn't look like the typical bakery. You see boxes and you see all of our packaging materials. And then there's a counter in the front, then that's for retail. We allocate a majority of the space for fulfillment and production. And as far as how we financed or how we got into this space, the landlord really wanted us there. Again, that I believe that was God, fate, universe. He was like, this space has been vacant for, I think, 1.5 years at that point. I really want you here. I've checked out your website. Can you pay the rent? I said, yes. It's actually what we were paying in Brooklyn, and we didn't even have a kitchen space to ourselves. So yeah, I can pay the rent. And then we negotiated basically terms that we would split the improvement 60-40. So he took 60%, I took 40%. And basically I was able to finance that through him with no interest. So it's just added on top of my base rent. I pay like an extra couple $100 paying back that loan that I took for him to build out all the little nooks and crannies that we need, like venting the oven through the roof, stuff like that. All the equipment was on me though. So I didn't know, but luckily I have mentors. You can finance equipment. Caviar, come here. You can finance equipment. Sorry, that's my dog. And that was like, and you just pay it back monthly until it's paid off. You can either lease it or finance it. We're leasing to own. So at the end of the contract, we pay $1 and we own the equipment.
Okay.
That's great. Michelle, do you have any thoughts yet about rolling into this business? And, sort of, it sounds like you had sort of 3 different levels, and it mirrors a little bit about what Azarias is doing, because she has the retail in the front, then she has, production and warehouse. So she has a sort of multi-purpose space. Where are you in your process?
I actually found 2 spaces. One got taken. There's another space that's really close to that location, and it would need it would need the build out for the 2 rooms, treatment rooms in the back. The last people did like $50,000 worth of improvements to the space. I've been looking at this space for a long time, like visiting. I would go visit my space. Then I went to go look at it, and she said that the people that took it, and this was after I started visiting it, they did $50,000 worth of improvements. So like I said, I just need to build out those 2 rooms. But I had been involved with somebody else. I was going to do this with somebody else. And so I've already been walked through that process of like talking with the landlord, doing a pre-lease, and then we were ready to sign the lease. And that's when things just didn't gel together, and it was better for us to not do it. But so in that respect, I think going through that process with somebody else gave me the courage to be able to do this. And then I was like, okay, wait, I can't put the horse before the cart. So I had to back up and I realized I needed to gather more information and try to find more funds and stuff. So
Yeah, and I've actually never heard of a landlord financing or like self-financing the tenant improvement. So was that something that your landlord readily offered, Azarias, or was that something you guys came to creatively?
I think he offered it.
Okay.
I think he said, write down what you need. And I put the biggest wish list I had. And maybe he was like, I'm not financing all of this. I don't know. But what came back to me was reasonable, because I knew it was a lot. And I think that because the tenant before us was a bakery, but she wasn't necessarily doing the type of production we were doing, it was a lot that had to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Herman, you've got a question?
Yeah, for Michelle. How are you accessing or reaching out to find locations? I mean, are you dealing with a real estate guy? Val?
There's a specific area I want to be in. I'm going through a process of trying to identify who my customers will be. I already have a customer list. I've been doing this for 30 years. They're calling me, hey, do you have the space up yet? What are your plans? Do you have anything started? So everything is kind of like, everything else is kind of like already on the go. But I'm more focused on an area, and I call up the people associated with the places that I say. So
real estate people?
I call the number that's on the space. I called the number. And it actually turned out to be the same girl who was negotiating the space that was across the street that got taken. So it was nice to already have that connection. It just happened to be the same person. So
I find networking people, going on my phone and just talking to people and listening and getting information like that. And then, light bulb goes off and I'm like, hey, do you know this, or do you know somebody who does that, or what's up with that, or whatever question I have. And I find that is my biggest resource, for information is networking, just knowing people, kind of like what you're doing, reaching out to your space person, and across the street there.
Michelle, what area are you looking at? What city?
I'm located in Poughkeepsie, over by the Dutchess County Airport.
Okay.
My sister's office is on Titusville near Gold's Gym. And so the spaces that are set up over there are perfect for the layout of what I'm looking to do. And I like that it's close enough to her office that existing patients have the convenience of, because a lot of them will get a massage and an adjustment. So there'll definitely be a transition period where I'll still be there for certain certain days or whatever. But I like that it'll be convenient, that people won't have to go far or,
That sounds great.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing kind of your experiences on this. Azarias, so when we think about, growing your business, especially to a sustainable point where you can make it your full-time gig, how in those early couple of years, you mentioned you did like 2,000 in revenue, then 14,000, then 200,000. How were you approaching customer growth during that time? What were some of the tactics you were leveraging to get more, attention to Blondery, whether that was online or into the retail store once you opened there?
Yeah, I would say it was 3 main tactics. One was getting my product in front of the customer as soon as possible at the price point I wanted it to sell for long term. Come over here. He's spoiled. Sorry.
I've got my dog in here too, who's somehow behaving.
Okay, it was 3 different things. So,
Okay.
The first I just said, and then 2 would be sorry. The first was I went to farmers markets to do that. So I would go to farmers markets or whatever pop-ups I could do and just get my product in front of those customers.
Mhm.
And then the second part was making sure that they would connect with me online. So whether it be getting their email address or just a follow on Instagram, I would say things like, "Oh, we're trying to get to 1,000 followers. Make sure you follow me on Instagram." And people were willing to do that because I told them why. Like they're like, "Oh yeah, I want you to get to 1,000 followers." And then I would say the last thing was just putting each customer, like one customer at a time. So I wasn't thinking I need 50 customers right now. Like it was this customer, I want them to have the best experience. So therefore, when I'm baking in the kitchen, I'm thinking that. When I'm setting up my booth, I'm thinking that. When I'm finishing up their transaction, I'm thinking that. Yeah,
yeah, thanks.
That's thinking about the customer experience is sort of what you're describing. The delivery, your delivery of the customer experience that's making them come back for more.
Yes.
And was that something that you envisioned from the start, or was it an ever-evolving experience?
Ever-evolving. I was always listening, taking down notes on questions they would ask. If I got a question more than once, I knew that something I was doing wasn't being communicated correctly or accurately or clearly. So I would try to make those adjustments before I did my next market or before I engaged with another customer via email. So just setting up systems so that I could scale the business one day, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I'm gathering from you is that I just don't think you're ever going to fail because you're very adaptive and malleable. And it seems like you're constantly either feeling out like the situation around you or what the customer needs and continuing to adapt to that. So I think if there's anything, other entrepreneurs can pull from this is you've got to be tethered to that vision and just keep going, but be very, adaptable and malleable.
And when you pivot to the success. I don't remember what I was listening to yesterday or who said that to me. Oh, I know. It was a podcast my mentor did actually. And it's pivoting to the success. So it doesn't necessarily mean quitting what you're doing now if it's not working. It means pivot. It doesn't mean like when you think of the word pivot in basketball, you don't lift up one of your feet. Like you stay where you are. You just move around and look at it from different angles. And I think when we hear the word pivot in business, we think that means you need to start a new business or start a new revenue stream, or and those could be accurate, but you have to have kind of the discernment to know which one you need at certain times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
that's very good.
from listening to your customers and to your team. I listen to my team a lot. I ask them, what do you think about this? Do you think we should do this? What do you think the issues would be with putting our cinnamon rolls on DoorDash? Do you think we'll have enough? You know, like, do you think that we should put our s'mores hot chocolate on DoorDash? How will we transport it? I ask them those questions because they usually have really good insight on what's going on in my business and in the world.
Who is this team? What is this team made up of for you at this point? Just what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so we have a head pastry chef now. She's actually a pastry chef. So she's in charge of all the baking. So I don't bake anymore, but they're all my recipes and things that we collaborate on. And then she has 2 people who work underneath her, who one covers like I would say the weekend pastries. So cinnamon rolls, donuts, things of that sort. And then another who is a porter, but we're also training her to start making cookie dough. So everyone's kind of like hands-on. And then the other 3 are retail. So they all work in some capacity forward facing for the customer experience. And then we have one other person who does fulfillment. So meaning they package and ship the orders, deal with customer service via email. And then I also have a bookkeeping team. So that's the answer to the sales tax thing. Herman, just get a bookkeeper. Like, get a bookkeeper and a tax accountant. I tried keeping up with sales tax on my own, and it's just such a complicated thing. I feel like in New York, especially, that especially with the different counties and all of that, I got a referral from a colleague I trust. She has multiple locations, and I've been using the same bookkeeper and I've been using the same tax accountant for 3 years, the bookkeeper team for 1 year, and I feel so much more confident in my books now, and they're worth every penny that I'm paying both companies. And they're 2 different companies.
Are the people that you mentioned on your team, is everybody full-time?
3 are full-time, and then the 3 retail are part-time. With retail, there's rarely people who want to work 40 hours a week. It's just like their kids or they have other full-time jobs, but they are very tapped in when they are there. Yeah.
You mentioned pivoting. Do you have any, stories you can tell about a path you started down that really didn't work out, and you listened to your customers, your team, your surroundings, whatever, and went a different direction?
Yeah, when I first started, I had 1 SKU, and that was the pecan and salted caramel blondie. So that's a stock keeping unit. That's what a SKU means. And from there, I was like, I want to add cookie dough, and I'm going to add pie dough, and I'm going to add, baked pies. And I did that for a while, but after receiving like feedback that, things were being mishandled basically by USPS, that's who I used at the time, I just stopped. I was like, let me just focus on one thing. And luckily I did, because that one thing ended up getting us to 200K in sales. We hadn't even added another SKU before we hit that. So I think it's focusing on one thing, especially if you have a product-based business, is really important. But even with a service-based business, I think like when you specialize in something, people know to come to you. For example, we're working with this coffee guy, and all he does is coffee machines. He doesn't do anything else. Like, he just knows his coffee machines. And I feel very confident in working with him because he can answer every single question I have about almost every single machine, because he's done that research. You can't, as a human being, consume multiple disciplines and be good at all of them, right? Like, it'll take a lifetime to do that, if you can even achieve that. So I think just being specialized in one thing gives your customer confidence in what you do. So if I was opening a salon or something like that, I would start with like 3 to 4 services. And I'm not joking. Like, I personally would. And I would get really good at them and like give them really cute branding and like make it a name for itself. Like, this is the Christy Special Facial or whatever. that's what I would do, because I think customers really gravitate towards one, not having a ton of options. They just need like 4, so they can choose, and then like their pricing strategy should match that. But yeah, I would stick to one SKU if I was restarting the business. I think that's something that really helped me grow.
I have a quick.
I want to say something real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, on that point, all these years I've been doing so many different installations, whether they be boilers, furnaces, you know, water filter systems or whatever, air conditioning, heating. I'm finding now I want to just specialize. So I want to just specialize on one system that I'm going to be putting in that Pam picked up on. It's a very environmentally friendly type of heating and cooling system. So it doesn't use natural gas or oil. So that's what I'm talking about. But I'm going to specialize in that. And even my truck, my lettering on my truck is has one of those units on there. They're called ductless mini splits, if you ever heard of them. But yeah, so that's what I'm going to be doing. And I mean, sure, can I do a boiler? Can I do a furnace? Can I do a condenser outside on someone's house? Absolutely. But my goal is to specialize, and I think that's a key that I've never had all throughout my career of business. That I was spread too thin. I was going in too many different directions. So and it's hard to keep up with that, with parts, inventory, troubleshooting, technology. It's quite a business when you're into heating and cooling. One last thing. One of my customers years ago said to me, he goes, because heating and cooling systems are not cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So we were just talking. He's a good friend of mine. He was a big gas manager at Central Hudson. He's retired now. But he said, Herm, he goes, people buy what they want. They don't buy what they need. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, he goes, I want a Mercedes or I want a BMW sitting out in my parking lot. Do I need that? Absolutely not. What I need is a boiler to heat my house. So, or I need air conditioning because the global warming is getting out of control, or for whatever, it's getting too hot out. So, so it's a tough business because it's a hard sell. Whereas with Azarias, she's in, or Azarias, you're in more of what I want type of business. So you're in, I want a brownie. I want a brownie with walnuts and, and chocolate, topping. Or, I want one of your blondies. Do I need that? No, but I want it.
I do. I need that.
You would be surprised at how many people feel they need it. And yeah, who get upset with us if we don't have something because they need it.
Well, this brings up a really interesting point about the very early stages of starting a business, because if you're chasing money and trying to offer services to anybody that will come to you and pay you money to do it, you do, to your point, Herman, sort of water down what your core offering is. I would guess that that's one of the biggest differentiators from entrepreneurs who are successful and entrepreneurs who fail, is just accepting that they're going to focus on one thing, two things, whatever it is, get really good at them, find a customer base, generate some income, then have the luxury of offering more or hiring other people who are specialized in offering more and leveraging them to grow their business. So yeah, you're
so right, Paul. You're so right, because when I approach a new customer from a standpoint where I've never met them before, and they're saying, well, we want to cool our house, and we want to, our air conditioning system is so old and it's the old refrigerant and blah blah blah, and actually can I replace that system? In my mind, oh yeah, absolutely, sure. But I want to sell them a ductless mini split because it doesn't use duct work. It's more highly efficient. It's environmentally friendly with the new refrigerants they have now. So that's the kind of slant that I go into, it's hard for me to do that, Paul.
Yeah.
To not sell what I know I can do.
Right.
But being that I want to specialize, that's the key for me. And I'm semi-retired. I'm retired. My career has always been heating and cooling on an industrial scale. So now that I'm into residential, it makes it's fun. And I told my wife, she goes, why do you need to work anymore? She goes, we don't need to work. And I'm like, well, I'll stop working when I don't like when it's not fun anymore, because I'm having a good time, building this thing up correctly with sales tax, like talking to Azarias about that, and the LLC, which I just set up last week, and all these little things with workman's comp, the liability, disability insurance. It's quite a lot to take in, and I'm a technician. It's hard for me to do bookkeeping and stuff like that, and I will be doing it in the beginning, but eventually, thanks Azarias, I'll look into getting a bookkeeper.
Try to find bookkeepers that charge based on your percentage of sales.
Right. I don't have that many sales. In other words, if I do a job for $30,000, say, and it's an installation of a ductless mini split, and I'm heating and cooling their whole home. Well, that's considered what's called a capital improvement. So I can fill out a form online. New York State has a site for that, and put in all the information. And then if the customer signs it, he doesn't have to pay sales tax. And I keep a copy of that in my file. And if I ever get audited, I'm saying, no, I got a capital improvement right here. They don't have to pay sales tax. So, but when I start doing service calls, then, I go to a house and someone needs, their heating system doesn't work, and the existing heating system doesn't work. I'm not there to replace it. I'm there to fix it. Well, that's a service call, and that's taxable.
Yep.
So then I would replace their, sensor, whatever it is. And, then I would charge them for the sensor, my labor, and then sales tax. Well, I have to be responsible for that sales tax, and this is all new to me. So I have to figure out a simple way. I like simple. So I want to figure out a simple way.
Is hiring a bookkeeper.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway here is, in the beginning, you are going to have to figure out a way to do it yourself. But I think for some of these, I guess you just services, responsibilities, whatever you want to call them, some of them are just not meant for the regular person to handle. They're meant for a professional to handle, especially when you start getting into tax and whatnot. So I think the moment you feel like, I actually could afford this at this point, that's when just go ahead and do it and get it out of the way, because
there's so many options.
Yeah.
There's like ones that cost $30 a month. There's ones that cost $500. There's so many options.
Yeah.
I just had a meeting with the president of Hudson Valley Federal Credit Union yesterday, just to introduce myself, kind of meet and greet. And not that I'm looking for a loan or anything, because I'm completely self-funded, but in any event, I was talking about sales tax, and he said some of his clients for Hudson Valley Federal Credit Union is they open up another account in the bank, and that account is strictly for sales tax.
Yep. Very smart. You should have one for payroll too.
That's tied into New York State, and then every quarter, I guess, they come in and they just grab the money, so you don't get a late fee and all that kind of stuff. And I guess you can estimate it, but I have to talk to my accountant about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I don't do that much. What I'm getting at is I don't do that much service call stuff. My goal is capital improvements. When I leave a home, I've raised the value of the home, of the customer's home, so it's not taxable.
Azarias, what do you want to share with us a little bit about where you see the business going, and like some things that you have in mind or that you've investigated to take your business to the next level, just so people are understanding sort of the trajectory for you?
Yeah, so we plan to grow by basically opening more locations. And we're actively raising $1.5 million. if any of you are investors. And yeah, we have a few different plans for how to get there. But I think like ultimately I see myself exiting the business in 8 years exactly. So that means I really have to get on opening these multiple locations. I would like to get to consistently 5 million in revenue. And what else? I think like obviously expanding the product line. I think that that's something that would just have to happen with the growth. And we're already doing that. We offer donuts, cinnamon rolls, cookies, making our cookie dough available on our website is something we've talked about. So there's lots of options, especially for a baked good company, in terms of where to go. Do we want to go in retail? Not really, in the sense of like traditional retail, like a grocery store. We're not thinking that right now, but you know, it's always an option. It's always a possibility that that could happen one day.
So by adding these locations, each location would be a similar format where you'd have the like retail, production, warehousing, or what is that looking like, do you think?
No, I think that it's going to be an interesting situation. I think our next location will be within the New York State area, just because we want to try this model out of having multiple locations. But I think just depending on where it is in the country is going to determine if we're going to build out a full kitchen again, or if we're going to just keep it like a storefront. So with it being in New York State, we can just literally shuttle the product in and out every single day. If it's in California, we can't do that. So we would have to build out another facility. Or, I mean, sometimes people will go to a co-packer. I'm very much against co-packing, but for certain items, I would do it. Like our dog treats, I would do co-packing for, which we sell a lot of, which would make sense for us to co-pack it. But yeah, I think that I see Blondery being the most successful overseas. So I'm not really focused on the United States, I would say. I'm focused on getting us another location in New York State that has a lot of foot traffic, but I'm not thinking third location is in the United States. I just don't, I see it, but I don't see the point. Like I see that because Blondery is such a luxury item, and I think that we're constantly having to justify who we are to an American customer. And I'm not super well traveled, but I've traveled enough to know that we would be probably much more accepted and appreciated in a different country.
So is the 1.5 million going toward that overseas expansion potentially?
No. But we need that here first.
Yeah, and I believe
a little bit of money.
I believe part of that goes to making your current operations more efficient. Isn't that correct? So that, I mean, that must mean if you're already looking at efficiencies and investing money in that, your demand must be relatively stable at this point.
Yeah. I can depend on making a certain amount every month.
Okay.
I can depend on that. And you know, that wasn't the case, you know, when I was doing drops or when I was doing like baking from my house. I think with each level of growth, when you take that risk, like there comes a reward if you're hitting all the marks right. I do think entrepreneurship is a lot about luck and like what Paul was saying, like being able to listen to your customers. But I it's not lost on me that I've gotten kind of lucky in some of the decisions and moves that I make. But I also do believe in God, and I do believe that I was being led in a really weird way, Hurricane Ida, like I was in a really weird way. Even I forgot to mention when I moved to New York, it was because of an earthquake. So it seems like natural disasters like tend to make me move and therefore change my life in such a positive way. So
hopefully there's not another one of those.
I mean, for me, it feels like it's a good thing if a natural disaster happened, but I get it. Yeah.
When you do go into a new market, what kind of things will you do to validate that that's a good market to go into? I know you paid a lot of attention to the customer experience and what they want. How are you thinking about that? If you move to, you know, open something in LA or Chicago or wherever, what would you do first just to make sure that's the right move?
I think even with raising the money, I'm always going to consider like, how would I spend my money, right? So how I would spend my money is I would start doing pop-ups in that city first. Because that's just the model that's been working for me, like I think that's for Blondery. When I set up a booth or when I set up a table, whatever, when people encounter my brand, they want to support, they want to taste, they want to buy because of how it's presented, because of, I guess, how I look. I don't know. I think there's a combination of things. And I think that's our superpower in a sense. So I would never open a location just randomly. Like, I don't have the luxury of doing that because I don't have millions of dollars sitting in the bank to fund it if it fails. I want to make sure that I have an audience there, and thank God, we ship nationwide. So we've shipped to all the states, including Hawaii, including Puerto Rico. So we technically have an audience in every state in America, but I would want to build that audience more before we announce, hey, we're actually opening down the street, I would do that for a few months if I could, at least a week before we would open. And so people could get familiar with us.
Yeah, and for companies that do have some sort of online and in-person presence, I mean, you do have the data of where you've shipped to at least guide you in that direction and sort of use it as a heat map a little bit. Yeah, Pam, any other questions for Azarias, or should we open it up to any?
Yeah, I just wanted to welcome Alicia. I don't see you, but I see that you've joined, so thank you for joining us. I think maybe Michelle, hopefully you've picked up some ideas here for getting your business off the ground. It sounds like you have already sort of but you said you've been around the business for 30 years, so you have a pretty good sense of things. But I think some of those issues that Azarias is speaking about, as far as opening the facility, because that's gonna bump up your costs immediately. Right? So having the business well behind you, I think is super important, so that you can justify having that space and supporting that space on a month-to-month basis, right? So that's super important. And just a quick comment for Herman, through this, I think maybe you've picked up on some ideas here of focusing on an individual product, staying patient about it, staying passionate about it, and you have New York State behind you supporting the clean energy transition. So I think you have sort of a marketing engine behind you in support of the system that you're getting going. Azarias, before we wrap up, is there anything else that comes to mind for you that would, that you feel like are pearls of wisdom for our audience and for other entrepreneurs?
I think keep your options open for funding, in the sense of, I may have said in, like the early days of Blondery, I'm never taking out a loan or I'm never getting a business credit card. And it's like, that was from a state of ignorance and not knowing like what that could open up for me. As Paul, I think, mentioned, like, I just recently took out a loan or line of credit with our bank. So it's very recent, like within the past 9 months we did that. And I mean, it's been helpful. Like it did help us get through a tough time. And you're developing a relationship with your bank and all of that. But I do think that building a business solely based on customer revenue is like the strongest way to build it, because it can't really fall underneath, unless you just change everything about your business and you start using, in our case, like bad ingredients, or like I completely neglect customer service or something of that sort. There's such a stable foundation. Like I've already gained my 1,000 fans, like my 1,000 true fans. And I know those people will support and order whatever I put out, as long as the business and the quality stays the same and the packaging stays the same, or only gets better, So building base one customer at a time just gives you such a long-term stability. And it's sexy to think about like, oh, I can raise money, or I can, like run ads and all these things. But sometimes that I don't know. I haven't been in that world yet, but we've seen the companies crumble because of, they're just pumping them with money, but there's no
Right.
real customer connection there. So yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that the capital markets are moving more toward proof. Like you're going to have to do what you've done, Azarias, before you can get capital from outside investors. You really got to prove there's something there. And you mentioned loans and taking out a line of credit, which is great. That actually sets us up for next week's session, where we're going to talk to one entrepreneur who has received a loan from Pursuit Capital and one person from Pursuit Capital. It's going to talk about everything you need to know about getting a loan to support the growth of your business. I think that's time. Pam, is there anything else you wanted to close with?
No, that's great. I want to thank you guys for taking time away from your businesses and away from your day to be with us today. And hopefully we'll see you next week. And Paul, if you want to just put our email addresses in the chat, and Azarias, if you wouldn't mind too, just to put your email in the chat so that if you want to reach out to us directly, you can feel free. And thank you so much, everybody. Good luck with everything, and have a great day.
Yeah, and thank you, Azarias. Really appreciate
Have
you.
the rest of your day.
Oh yeah, thank you,
everyone.
Azarias. Great to have you, and thank you everybody for being here.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay.